Hello everyone, Stats vs Serral. What really happened in the grand final of the GSL versus the world? Let's break it down game by game. Links will be in the description box below if you want to skip ahead to a certain game, or if you prefer the written format, you can check out my post where I break the games down in detail. Jumping right into map 1, let's look at what Stats plan to do for this series. He always wanted to use War Prism and Archon drops to secure the game along with Zealots, and in this game 1 it was extremely successful, and part of that is because Serral decided to try a very sketchy Link Queen defense with Hydras mixed in at around 620, but that doesn't really work when you consider Archons and Zealots shred these types of units. Now, hopefully you noticed that, but at around 620 something, Serral managed to spot the War Prism with a Link, so he sends his queens over to stop the War Prism, the Warpin, and somehow manages to get the kill on the Prism. Immediate advantage Serral. But Stats also had a Phoenix, and thanks to the Phoenix, the Zealots, the Archons, Stats manages to kill all the queens, and look at all these Links coming in to die. This is the beginning of the end for map 1, because Stats is never going to lose when you give him such an advantage. Not only does he get so many kills, his Zealots, which defended his third base, managed to run all across the map and get a ton of drone kills, essentially making Serral stuck on units. And these units in particular, Hydras and Zerglings, aren't going to beat Zealot Archon. At around 8 minutes, Serral manages to take the Protoss third base, but even though Stats is essentially all-in on Archons and Zealots, he manages to pull off incredible micro to pretty much destroy Serral. Serral keeps losing drones, he keeps losing army, he can't fight off of 40 workers against Stats 50, and although he has 3 hatcheries, he is not on a 3 base economy, he doesn't have any banelings, he doesn't have any roaches, he has essentially no chance at this point. All Stats needs to do is keep microing, and he wraps up this game brilliantly. Heading straight into map 2, we can see that Stats is feeling a bit cheesy, and I think the map favors this sort of playstyle, so more power to him. He has the watchtower, he's already put down a pylon, but this is the key moment. At 145, Stats waits, goes back to the tower, sees no more drones on the way, Serral pulls back, calling his bluff, so to speak, and Stats decides, you know what, I'm going to win this game. Throws down 2 cannons immediately. Serral got completely tricked due to seeing a Nexus. He thought Stats was faking him, but Stats actually manages to pull off the steal, and now it's too late for Serral to do anything. He puts down 3 spine crawlers in range of the cannons. The panic move is real. He is going to lose all his drones, he's going to lose his hatchery, and Serral is pretty much fucked. All he can do now is essentially take another hatchery, cancel these spines, get the fuck out, but he tries to give it his all and basically do his best to take out these cannons, take out the pylon at least, to slow the Protoss down, but it's too little too late, and Stats manages to do a decisive push with his cannons, a decisive strategy, so to speak, and come out with the 2-0 lead pretty much for free against the world's best Zerg player, arguably. Map 3. In this game, Stats decided to do something very sketchy. He proxied the Stargate, got 2 oracles, and decided, I'm going to cheese this Zerg out once again. But Serral, with just seconds to react thanks to his overword, manages to stop the oracles, kill 1 oracle, losing only 5 drones, and find the Stargate. At this point you have to give it up to the Zerg player, and Stats is essentially fucked, because as soon as you proxy a Stargate and the Zerg finds it, guess what comes next? At around 6 minutes, after getting more than enough Roaches to protect himself from the incoming Archon drop, which at this point was expected from Stats, Serral puts down the Spire and gets ready to destroy a Protoss player who can't have any anti-air in terms of Phoenixes, the best counter to Mutalisks. All the while getting +1 range attack and Roach speed, because any Zerg player will tell you first you hit them with the Mutalisks and then the Roach tsunami rolls them over. At around 8 minutes, the Mutalisks hatch. Stats finally sees the Spire, but it's too little too late. Not only does Serral have all the Mutalisks ready to blindside him, he's going to get the War Prism. Stats doesn't even have Storm finished, he throws down 2 random Stargates. Too little, too late, the Zerg player is completely in control. At around 9 minutes, the inevitable Roach push comes in. Stats can't at the same time defend from a possible mass Mutalisk play and Roaches. He even manages to lose his Immortals bonus shields thanks to the Mutalisks. Serral can literally A-move at this point and win the game. 130 army supply to 50, the game is absolutely over. And it's all because Stats decided to proxy his most important building, to try and get a fast one over on Serral. Darkness Sanctuary, map 4. Once again, Stats is up to his usual bullshit, but this time he's prepared a special Zealot trap for Serral. Serral, of course, has decided to adapt and make Roaches instead of making Zerglings and Hydras and begging to lose. Now, Stats is a bit too predictable at this point. Serral knows this, what this attack looks like, he knows what to expect. But Stats thinks he can win anyway with just the 2 Archons. I think he was extremely optimistic in walking up this ramp. He already got the kill on the 4th base, he didn't need to overcommit like this. Serral makes only Roaches as fast as possible, sends everything he has and manages somehow, barely, to hold on without losing virtually any workers, only losing his army, using them perfectly to hold on. Stats overplays his hand, gets a bit too predictable, I think, and Serral takes full advantage with a very simple Roach defense. At around 7:30 you can already tell the Protoss attack is over. But what a lot of us failed to see at the time is that Serral had snuck in an infestation pit, and at 8 minutes he threw down a Hive and Spire because he decided it was his turn to take advantage of the close spawns. Almost a full minute later, the Phoenix scouts the Spire, but Serral has hidden the Hive, and Stats isn't aware. These aren't going to be Mutalisks again, these are going to be motherfucking Broodlords. At around 11 minutes, Stats pressures Serral's 4th base, but Serral manages to win just enough time thanks to a counterattack on Stats' own 4th base, 3rd base technically, forces the recall and buys more than enough time for his Broodlords to morph and secure him the game. At around 12 minutes, Stats wishes he wasn't in this game right now because the Broodlords show up over his 4th base and the game is essentially over. There is a short back and forth thanks to Serral having no detection at one point, but any Protoss player will tell you as soon as you see Broodlords over your base and that's the first time you're hearing of a Greater Spire, the game is already over. Stats does his best, but a little before the 16-minute mark, the last of his army gets killed off, and that's all she wrote. Map 5, 16-bit, is where Stats actually decided to make a change, didn't use Archon drops to attack, but instead decided to keep basically all his units back and defend a supposed all-win he was expecting. Now, this is where Serral lost his motherfucking mind and started playing like a Zerg on the ladder. At around 7:30 you could see Serral begin morphing overwards, meaning he wanted to drop inside the Protoss base. At around 8:30, after getting tagged with an Oracle, Serral decided he could still try and pull the drop off. It's now 9 minutes into the game. Serral has taken no damage, but his best plan is to unload the overwards, break down the rocks and A-move into an Archon, about 80 Mortals and a bunch of fucking Storms, against the Protoss not doing anything. Stats was perfectly comfortable, sitting in his base, playing basically AFK, and Serral decides, you know what I should do? A-move my entire army into him. He drops some creep with the overwards, and for a second it almost looks like it wasn't a bad idea. But then all you have to do is look at the supplies and ask yourself, was it really worth losing your entire army to kill some Immortals? At 10:45, after forcing anti-air defense, Serral decides it's a great time to switch into Mutalisks. At this point, I think he had literally no clue what to do. And as we are watching him kill off 3 Immortals essentially for free and almost get a kill on Stats Fort base, I have no idea why Serral refuses to tech up and essentially win the game against the Protoss player playing AFK in his base. At around 12:40, Serral has made so many Mutalisks, and he decides the best use of these Mutalisks is to engage an Archon Stalker Storm army. He literally almost lost his entire army, the army he'd been building up to for the past 3 minutes or so, to a bunch of Stalkers and 2 Psystorms. I'm sure we've all been there. The Zerg player looks to be playing bad, so we decide to move out, and then we get a 360 surround on our entire army and everything dies. At this point, Serral should have won the game, in my opinion. He should have used this advantage, knowing full well Stats is unable to push, to tech up and finally win the game. But he decided not to do that. After once again taking a ton of damage on his Mutalisks, even after winning a free battle, Serral decides it's time to tech up to workers instead of Hive, and I think this is where it all goes downhill. At around 15 minutes, Serral once again pulls off an incredibly difficult attack to hold for the Protoss. He takes out a ton of workers, but to do this attack he sacrifices pretty much his entire army, and at this point you can see him remax almost exclusively in Hydras. Serral's plan is to go Hydra worker against a Protoss player who has everything he could ever need to destroy that. At about 16 minutes is when Serral finally puts down the Hive, a full 8 minutes later than the previous game. That should say it all. And as soon as the Hive is done, he decides to use it exclusively for +3 attack on his Hydras. Jesus fucking Christ! At around 18:30 is where Serral does his final good, so to speak, attack. But once again, he's stuck on a composition that's just not good at this point. He loses so many units, like an unbelievable number of units, and he keeps making Hydras. He's absolutely stuck in his head making Hydras, thinking that's the only thing he can do at this point. And this is the writing on the wall. Serral is going to lose this game. A few minutes later, Stats pushes into the Zerg with a bunch of Archons and a handful of Zealots, supported by 3 Phoenix, to essentially end the game. This looks fucking ridiculous considering Serral's economy was unharmed the entire game, but he still managed to lose. On map 6, Lost and Found, Serral seemingly found what he was missing in game 1, map 1. And he decides to put down a Baneling Nest at about 6 minutes. This Baneling Nest will not only help him completely crush Stats push coming in about a minute, it will also help him absolutely annihilate the Protoss a few minutes later. At around 7 minutes, Stats push of Archons, Zealots and the War Prism once again comes. At this point it's so unbelievably predictable for Serral, and he decides to pressure the fort base. But as soon as he sees the Banelings hatch, he knows I am absolutely fucked. There is no way in hell Serral is going to lose this push with Queens, which are essentially Roaches that shoot up, Hydras, and Banelings, which are going to kill all the Zealots. Stats pieces the fuck out because he has no other option. The Protoss player is completely figured out. What's even better for Serral is that around 8:30 he manages to flank the War Prism and take it out with his Hydras, essentially removing any fear of a counterattack by Stats. Starting at around 9 minutes, Serral starts to go absolutely bonkers, throwing Banelings everywhere, attacking 3 locations practically at the same time. He morphs even more Banelings, he has Hydras, Lynx. It isn't the sturdiest army, he can very easily die if he miscontrols, but this is where he starts killing tons of workers for the Protoss. At around 9:20 he even uses a bunch of Banelings to blow up defenses at the fort base, and at around 9:40 he breaks down the rocks and attacks the third base. with his Link, Hydra and Banelings. So many Banelings. Serral takes a breath, gets some workers ready in case he has to transition, and at around 10:30 once again he collapses on top of the Protoss army with his Banelings, Links and Hydras. There is nothing at this point the Protoss can do. He's lost too many workers, he's lost too many units, and Serral is just going to row him over, sealing the deal with a Baneling run by, which kills pretty much all the workers there, causing Stats to peace the fuck out. On the final map 7, Dreamcatcher, at around 5 minutes is when the final drone for Serral was made, and that can only mean one thing when Zerg only has Roaches. Serral is going to own the Protoss player and absolutely stomp him if there are no defenses. It's at exactly this time though that Stats manages to use a very small number of adepts to get a ton of worker kills, and just as everyone was focusing on how brilliant Stats is for having killed so many workers essentially for free, while Serral hides Roaches and defends with Queens, no one was paying attention to Serral's production tab, and all you need to know about a Zerg player is watch his Warva. Where is the Warva going? If you see no workers when he's only at 44, you should be well aware what's coming next. At around 6:40, Stats is left to freely kill creep spread with his Observer and Archons, and Serral is nowhere to be found. At just under 7 minutes, Serral breaks down the rocks and kills the first Immortal for free, and Stats now knows what is up. He has one shield battery which is going to get taken out at the 3rd base, and he is essentially out of time. Look at the army supply, 100 to 30, Stats has no chance to defend this. He is too late, he hasn't scouted Serral properly. Serral is going to morph some Ravagers, keep making Roaches and do his best to row over Stats. The Protoss player starts warping in sentries, buildings, anything he can to hold on, but it's already too late. Not even 3 Mortals, 2 Archons and 4 sentries are enough to stop Serral's push, and no amount of Warp Prism micro can handle a 70 supply deficit when it comes to army. Serral's gutsy play, walking his Queens across the map, deciding to make Roaches against someone who already has Immortals, is seemingly safe, as a lot of people would say. That's how Serral manages to take this series away and become the champion of GSL versus the world. I hope you guys liked this video. I really enjoyed watching this final. ZVP is my second favorite matchup to watch, so it was awesome to see Serral perform to an incredible level. Aside from that one game, which we will never mention again, Serral performed marvelously. He definitely deserves this championship. I think he was a lot more impressive when he faced Invasion and Dark in particular, but what can you say, it's a final, people are bound to make some mistakes due to nerfs, you can't really fault him for it, and he got the job done in the end. Thanks as always for watching, I'll see you next time, whenever the fuck that is, bye.